Hi everybody in the vinyl community. Today's video is going to be my favorite debut albums, and I'm going to do this chronologically. It would have been easy for me to just pick all the classic rock albums, Led Zeppelin and Creedence and Crosby, Stills and Nash and things like that, but I wanted to go a little more, not really obscure, but a little deeper. So I'm going to do this chronologically, and we're going to start with my all-time favorite band, the Beatles. This album came out January 10th, 1964. Actually came out 10 days before Meet the Beatles on Capitol. Various pressings of this, all kinds of back cover variants, but the sound on this is really good, and you couldn't, for an initial album, look at these songs. It's just a lot of covers, but it really showed you what a great band they were. And then, of course, 10 days later, we got the Capitol version. And then we go to, from 1964, we jump up to 1967. This is a band who was unfortunate enough to have Matthew Katz as a manager, who basically screwed over every band he ever worked with. They ended up suing Matthew. He was getting all of their royalties. They were getting nothing. They ended up suing, and as a result, they got the rights back to their music. But when Sundays tried to reissue their albums, Matthew sued, claiming that he had the rights to the artwork. So the albums were pulled off the market. He was just screwing them over from day one. He also managed It's a Beautiful Day and Jefferson Airplane. This is a reissue, and it does have the original poster, which I had Jerry Miller sign. Jerry plays locally here every Tuesday night, so you get a really good chance to go see him whenever you want to, and he can still play. He's still great. And then from 1967, we move to another album from 1967. This is an album that my friend Gloria turned me on to, and it's one of the first psychedelic albums out of San Francisco. Just a fantastic album. Flying High, Not So Sweet Martha Lorraine, and a song called Grace, which is a tribute to Grace Slick. Fantastic record. If you have not heard this, by all means, check it out. And then we go to another album from 1967. And as much as I love the Beatles, of course, how could I not love the Monkees? And this is a Run Out Groove reissue on yellow vinyl. Comes with a bonus album of outtakes. This is a stereo mix. I do have an original mono pressing as well. But I started watching their TV show in 67, and I just got hooked. I just love the music. I love the zaniness of the show. I used to record it, the TV show, on my little tape recorder, and then I would listen to it all week long until the next week when the new episode came on, and then I'd record over the last episode and start listening to the new episode until the following week. Been a big Monkees fan for forever. And then from 1967, we go to 1968. Not only is it my favorite debut album by this band, but it's one of my all-time favorite albums. And that would be the first Blood, Sweat, and Tears with Al Cooper. This is the Speaker's Corner reissue, the audiophile pressing. I never get tired of this album. I don't know how many different times I've bought copies of it for whatever reason, but just my favorite, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And I like all their stuff up through even New Blood and No Sweat after David Clayton Thomas left the band. And then we go to something a little different, and this is from 1968 also. What can you say about Townes Van Zandt? Just one of the greatest songwriters ever. This is his first album, and it's got Tecumseh Valley, Waiting Around to Die, Sad Cinderella, The Velvet Voices. It's just such a good album. I never got a chance to see him. It was one of my big disappointments, but I still have the records. And this is a Vinyl Me Please pressing that came out last month, I believe. It's on blue vinyl. And then again, 1969 was one of good year, but this is one of my favorite albums from 1969. It's also one of my favorite all-time albums, and that would be the James Gang Year album. This is a promo copy here. Take a Look Around, Funk 48, Bluebird, Lost Woman, Collage. Just fantastic album. Much, in my opinion, much better than the rest of their albums and the rest of their catalog. And now another record from 1969. I'm not a big fan of Bread per se, but I love this album. Just Dismal Day, London Bridge. Every song on here is just killer. It Don't Matter to Me, Friends and Lovers, Family Doctor. I remember as a kid when this came out, I sat down and tried to add up all the money that was shown on the cover. I don't remember what it came to, but I actually did it. But good album. And then we go to 1971, and I remember when I heard the very first song off this album on the radio, and I thought, wow, I've never heard anything like this before. And it was a song called Vahevala. And what this was originally a Kenny Loggins solo album, his first solo album, or debut album. And Jim Messina was the producer. He ended up doing so much on this album that they titled it Kenny Loggins with Jim Messina sitting in. And then, of course, it was such a success that they continued as Loggins and Messina and put out a number of great albums. I got to see them live about 10 years ago, front row. Just a fantastic show. I'm so glad I got to see them. And then another of my all-time favorite albums from 1971, and that's Naturally by J.J. Cale. This album is so lo-fi. What he did is, first off, to avoid confusion with John Cale of Velvet Underground, he went by J.J. Cale. Two of the songs, he used a primitive drum machine because he couldn't afford a drummer. And those songs were Crazy Mama and Call Me the Breeze. Just fantastic album. Not only my favorite J.J. Cale album, but one of my all-time favorite albums. And then we go to another album from 1971. Three sons of Air Force military personnel that were stationed in England got together and started playing at the Officers Club and various clubs around town. And because they wanted people to know that they were not British, they called themselves America. And the first pressing of this album did not have A Horse with No Name. And it was a mediocre selling album. It did okay, but nothing great. Originally, A Horse with No Name was called Desert Song. And they started playing that song at some live concerts in London and other parts of Europe. And they had such a good response to it that they recorded it and added it to this album. And when that song became such a hit, the album took off, and they ended up getting the Grammy for Best New Artist. Get some more of my notes here. So after America, we come to my third favorite artist. First is the Beatles, then the Monkees, and then Bruce Springsteen. Best live show I've ever seen. His worst show, in my opinion, is better than anybody else's best show. Just fantastic live performer. This is not my favorite Bruce album. That would be The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle, the second album. But for a debut album, this is really good. Blinded by the Light, Growing Up, Lost in the Flood, Spirit in the Night, It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City. Just a fantastic album. And then we move to 1976. The Bruce album was 1973, by the way. 1976, this album, I had not heard it back then. Matter of fact, I'd never heard of this fella until I saw the movie There's Something About Mary. And that was, Jonathan Richman was in that film. And if you remember, he's the guy that was playing the guitar with the little segues and introductions to different parts of the film. And I just loved what he did in that movie, which led me to discover the Modern Lovers. Modern Lovers had, let's see, Jerry Harrison went on to Talking Heads, and David Robinson went on to the Cars. And this album has songs like Roadrunner, Pablo Picasso, Modern World, She Cracked. It's really, really a fun album, and I love Jonathan Richman's music. I've probably seen him live, I don't know, 7 or 8 times maybe. And then we go to 1978, what could be one of the best debut albums of all time. The Cars, first album. Wow. What can I say? Everybody knows this album. Just a fantastic debut album. Can't say enough about it. Just, it's one I never get tired of playing. And then we go to 1986, and that brings us to Steve Earle. This is a signed copy. If you ever get a chance to see Steve Earle, he's pretty good about meeting people and signing stuff for them. But Guitar Town, Goodbye's All We Got Left, Hillbilly Highway, Just a Good Old Boy, My Old Friend the Blues. Just a really good album. I like everything Steve's done. I have probably 80% of his catalog. And that brings us to the last album. This is from 2016, debut album by what they call a supergroup out of Chicago with Kelly Hogan, Casey Madonahue, Scott Legion, Alex Hall, and Nora O'Connor. And that would be the Flat Five. These guys are fantastic. It's 5-part harmony, fantastic musicianship, great songwriting. All the songs are written by Scott's brother, Chris. Um, Casey actually toured with Brian Wilson's Smile and did some vocals for that tour. He specifically Don't Worry Baby. Um, Casey and Scott are also members of NRBQ. They have 2 albums out, both of them really good. Um, do yourself a favor, check them out on the streaming service or on YouTube. They do a very eclectic style of music. Some of it will remind you of the Lennon sisters. Some of it is just beautiful pop songs. The musicianship is fantastic. If you're in the Chicago area, they play quite often in a place called the Hideout. And if they're ever on tour in your area, by all means, go. So that's my favorite debut albums. I could have done another 20, but I want to keep this fairly short. So I'd be interested to see what your favorite debut albums are. Leave them in your comments below. And if you like these videos, subscribe and hit that like button. So until next time, ciao.